All right. Well, it's a pleasure to have Ryan Wan. I can tell a funny story about how I met Ryan Wan. I was working in a paper about mobility and segregation, and then Ryan published a PNS paper. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, he did. So I decided to become friends, collaborators. So yeah, in the last years we have been working together. Ryan is actually a professor at the Department of Civil Engineering.
Right.
And he has been doing amazing stuff with also mobility data, working on resilience, working on segregation too. And he's going to present today something.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. And I'm glad to be here. Like I said, I know there's things going on, so I'll try to make myself as interesting as possible. Like Esteban described, in my lab, we mostly working on human mobility and urban resilience, right? And when I'm talk about resilience, there are really two directions here. Let me see if I can move the screen. One is shocks. So basically, when human disaster, when natural disaster happens, can be extreme events, weather events, terrorist attacks, so on and so forth. This kind of shocks, when they happen, they tend to change human mobility drastically in a short period of time, right? But also very likely to return back to normal relatively fast. So that's one thing we want to capture, how that perturbation happens and what kind of patterns follows. Then another direction is about stress. So these are more about the chronic issues of our society. Can be racial segregation, isolation, lack of quality services. So those things always stress our societies, like slow cook pot, right? You don't immediately see an issue or change in humans' behavior, but without paying attention to it, it can drastically change our society. But of course, a lot of times they are not separated, right? So for example, when COVID-19 happens, it suddenly and drastically changes people's mobility very fast during a short period of time. And it takes a long time to recover back to normal. And during that time, of course, a lot of people, but especially people from marginal communities, can suffer from that, right? So that's why I'm going to start with one study, which is more focused on the shock plus stress, which is a large-scale crisis, and how that changes people's mobility behavior. I'm going to introduce 3 studies, and this one is a published, well-developed study. From this picture, you probably can't imagine what the next 2 will be, but we'll get there. So this is a more mature study published. We already know when COVID-19 hit us, people's mobility changed drastically, right? So this basically we use data this is from Cubic, now Spectus. We, observe the first 6 months in 2020, how people's mobility, basically the total mobility flux into all kinds of, different neighborhoods, how that changed, right? So for the first 2 months, not much change, pretty stable. And then COVID hit us. The red line represents the declaration of national emergency. And after that, in about 2 weeks, mobility drastically reduced, right, on the entire country level. Then around the end of March, mid-April, it starts to slowly recover. Note that this is just the mobility, right? It does not cover any transportation modes. Some transportation modes haven't recovered. Took a long time to recover, probably haven't recovered yet. But that's the general pattern, right? So we observe the mobility pattern, and we hope to capture that using a conceptual model. Somehow that part is covered, but so we have both on the top try to describe the spatial decay. So meaning that, let's say at time 0, right, COVID hit us at the beginning of the COVID. If you were living inside of the epicenter of COVID, right, a lot of cases happening around you, for example, in Boston, in Chicago, then your mobility is going to decay a lot, right? Your commitment to social distancing is very high. So that's why you have a very small circle here, right? Meaning that you reduce your mobility a lot. But then if you are further from epicenter, probably going to feel safe, okay, right? You're still concerned. But when you go out, like me, right? I live 1.5 hours away from Boston. My small neighborhood, I remember, now I cannot go to the university. I can still go out with my kids, take a short walk, right, around the neighborhood, and it didn't feel unsafe, right? So I'm still committed to the social distancing, but I can still maintain some of my mobility, right? So the commitment to this decay is not as high. Then with time goes by, there's a temporal decay. So this decay, again, describing your commitment to social distancing, right? With time goes by, as a beginning, yeah, you can stay at home, but nobody can stay at home 24/7 for an extended period of time, right? After a while, you're naturally going to expand your mobility, right? You're going to, again, resume some of your activity. And for a lot of people, that's actually not a choice, right? That's a must, right? So because of that, you can see the circle represents your radius or your size of your activity space actually increase a little bit, right? So we basically try to, we observe the data, we see the pattern, we hope to use this to capture people's mobility pattern. And that's basically what we did, right? Based on that, we developed this model here. If you are interested, we can discuss more details of that, but this basically help us to capture the conceptual visualization I showed before. Right? So once we have this model, then we can fit mobility patterns from different neighborhoods to this model. And then from this model, we are trying to focus on two key parameters. One is K, so the level of social distancing, how much you are committing to social distancing, right? But particularly, we focus on K0 actually. So at the beginning, how much you reduce your mobility pattern, you reduce that. And then we also focus on this alpha, which is the rate of decay, right? As time goes by, how long it takes you to return back to normal, or who can maintain this kind of who can keep a low alpha to have a low decay function rate and maintain this kind of a commitment to social distance. Right? So that's basically what we the mathematical model. Again, if you are interested, I'm happy to discuss more about it. But then we basically fit our data to the entire United States. We choose our K0 or time 0 at the beginning, at each state, at the time for each state to declare their their emergency, right? When they declare their state wanting to emergency as our time 0, that's of course are different for different states. Then we fit the mobility data, which is safe graph data. We chose 5 different parameters, but R4 here is the output. So basically how the flow from one neighborhood, one CBG going to other CBGs in other counties. And then here, the red line represents the empirical results we observed. And then the blue line represents the fitted function from our model. You can see that we think they fit relatively well, right? And with some manipulation of the function, of course, we can get this, exponential decay here for the 5 different parameters. And then again, red line is the average of the empirical data. Blue is a model. Each dot is at a different time what was the empirical result on the county level, so across the entire United States. So after proving that, okay, we have pretty good alignment between the empirical data and the model. So our model seems like to be able to capture the phenomenon. Then again, like I said, right, we want to focus on these 2 parameters to capture some of the hidden inequality. So we used, we want to answer, right, how disparity impacts commitment to social distancing behavior. We actually look at K0 And not surprisingly, right, you probably already suspect this, for higher income population, their K0 at the beginning of the pandemic was high, right? So for the more wealthy population, they are able to reduce their mobility to a higher level at the beginning, right? Which I think many of you probably saw that article from New York Times at the beginning of the pandemic. It shows the top 25 and the bottom 25 population based on their income, how long take them to reduce their mobility, their travel distance by half, right? And then the most wealthy group took 3 days earlier than the least wealthy groups. Of course, there are high variations, and for many of you, you probably know better than me, 3 days is a big deal, actually, right? So that's K0. Then we also generally see that with higher income population, they are able to maintain their social distancing for a longer period of time. So meaning that they have lower alpha, which is also interesting that with these populations, they not only able to reduce their mobility, they can stay home longer, right? They can do more remote working. And then, so that's kind of linked to the phenomenon we heard during the pandemic as well, right? Many of the workers, we call them essential workers and hailed them as our heroes. They are heroes, but a lot of times they don't actually have a choice. They have to go out, right? They have to earn a living. They have to support their family, right? It's hard to say if really from the bottom of their hearts, do they really want to do this or not? They're forced to do, right? You probably also heard this story that suddenly there are so many low-income populations inside of the Whole Foods, right? The high-end grocery stores to picking up groceries because they now are buying groceries from this fancy places and deliver to the rich population, right? Not only the rich population can stay away from risk, they can also shift their risk to the low-income population. So that's basically what we observed here, right? So this is a first study I want to share with you. The second study we also want to see, so we also want to look a little bit at the mobility, but also immobility patterns, right? A lot of people stayed at home during the pandemic. Are there any differences? This one is an ongoing research, right? So not published. I'm just sharing some of my updates with you. That's why the middle of the horse, right? So this is actually a visualization we created with Professor Barabasi's lab. So during the pandemic, we know people's mobility have changed. We took this Manhattan area, tilted a little bit, and then made a mirror of it. So this looked like a pair of lungs, right? Yeah, exactly. It looked like a pair of lungs. So what we want to show is that during the daytime, people coming into Manhattan area, it's kind of like oxygen getting into lungs, right, to make it live, right? So it's expand. At the nighttime, people go back to their home, then Manhattan kind of shrink, contract, right? So this kind of rhythm is a healthy rhythm, right, for the city to have this kind of rhythm. But then when pandemic hit, you can see that it starts to wither, right? Even when during the weekdays, when it's expanded, it does not expand to what it used to before, right? So we try to capture this phenomenon using the mobility data. I know this maybe creeps some of you out. This always creep me out. But basically, based on that, right, we want to answer this question: can we model the human immobility rhythm using the respiration function? That's based on the observation, the visualization. We want to capture that, which you can think of. Right? Human mobility. I know many of you are working in this area or have been reading papers in this area. It's a pretty. It has high periodicity, right? Pretty regular. So if you look at the mobility patterns, this is the outflows, right, from New York, from Los Angeles, from Boston, some are higher, some are lower. X is time. Each kind of like cycle represents 1 day, 124-hour behavior. Y is the percentage of population at home, right? At home. So at the nighttime, of course, it can reach the highest if people are staying at home. And then in the daytime, starts going out, go to work, go to other places, go to school, then it drops, right? So always during the 5 weekdays, it have this pretty regular rhythm. And then to capture that, we just want to use a very simple model to capture it, right? So this is a sine function we use to capture that. So basically RT here, we can, for R, we can describe that as a percentage of population staying at home. But then this rhythm can be captured by A times sine xt plus phi, because usually the highest point does not show as 12 a.m. Right? So it can offset a little bit. And that offset may be different from different population. And plus B, because you have actually, the average is not at 0. Right? So basically adding a few parameters to this sine function, and then we can try to describe, we try to use that to describe human mobility. And basically this is what we see, right? For the 251 working days in the 2019, across the United States, if we take that as an average, these are the fitted results, right? So the red line is the average, and then each gray line there is 1 day of the fitted pattern in 2019. We test that, and this model fits with mobility rhythm pretty well. So from there, we basically have, again, 3 parameters that we want to focus on, right? The 2A, which is the range, so 2A, which is a range from top to the bottom, that shows how many population actually leave home, right? We have phi, which is at what time, this rhythm happened, and basically what time, how many hours after midnight this reached a peak, something like that, right? So you can understand that way. And then B is average baseline, right? So on average, what the population is staying. We fit this model, and then we start looking at different groups. These are on the national level again. These are the so we fit the white population, Hispanic population, and Black population. The blue is again at different hours. So each circle represents 24 hours. Right? Blue represents at each hour what percent of population are at home. Right? So the circle is 100%. So maybe here, that's 90%. 90% of population are at home. And here, maybe 40%, right? 40% of the population are staying at home. So then the blue, again, is an empirical result. And then the red is based on the model, which would be the best fitted result, right? So from this, you can already see that Black look a little bit different. Right, Black look a little bit different. And then, in fact, when we start taking a look at the different parameters here, comparing different groups, we see that for range, Black population is at the bottom, right? Black population at the bottom. If you recall, range is from the peak to the bottom, how far that is, right? So a smaller percentage of population, Black population, or the majority Black neighborhood, a smaller percentage of this population, show this rhythm, leaving home and come back, right? And then when we see the phase angle, the peak for white and roughly Hispanic is around 12 a.m., right? But this hour is postponed by 1.5 hours, so about 90 minutes for Black population, right? If you think about what job that implies, right, it shows that for majority of population from white and to a certain extent Hispanic population are more likely to have the classical work schedule we're thinking about, right? But for the Black population, the work situation probably are different, right? More labor intensive, more different hours, working hours with different type of time shifts, right? Then we also look at the baseline. Again, Black population is at the bottom. This, of course, vary from different states. We can discuss about different states, what that is. But we then also expanded this to during COVID. So the result we showed before, this is from 2019, right? Then we also examined this during 2020, during COVID. Basically confirm what we showed from before. For the first study, we'll only focus on income, right? But for here, the racial differences, disparities are more clear, especially when we start looking at B, right? So for white population, during COVID, you should have, we hope that people will stay at home more, right? So you are more immune from the risk. In fact, for both white neighborhood and Hispanic neighborhood, that baseline, the red, increased, right? So meaning that they spend more time at home. But for Black population, not too much, right? The difference is actually not statistically significant, right? So again, telling us that some kind of there's significant disparity and some risk has been transferred from one population, one group, social group to another. So that's the second study I want to share with you. The third one, which I actually hardly ever showed it to any group yet, because this is definitely the one we're still working on, right? So it's basically, we are trying to model mobility using machine learning. And I cannot claim myself as an expert in this area. I'm still learning. So what I'm representing, I'm trying to present the research as much as I can. But you all know how it happens, right? The students are very interested in this topic, has the right background I can only support, right? So this is what we are trying to do. But I'm learning. But I mean, if there are detailed questions you do want to know, I will put you in contact with my PhD students and we can have more conversation. But basically, we are trying to using machine learning to predict human mobility. And it's important, right? We know it helps to advancement in transportation systems. It's important for transportation system, for epidemic control, for sustainable urban planning, a lot of things. The problem is the definition is pretty straightforward, right? If you think about people's mobility, one individual, a user's historical mobility sequence is something like this, right? At different time points, they're at different location, right? This X can be a location. This X basically is a vector that you have a time, right? But also the location, right? This can be a POI, this can be a lat and long, right? So that's what it is. Then how do you use that to predict at future timestamp, starting from t+1 all the way to t+h, to predict their locations, right? So pretty simple, straightforward. That's basically the biggest question. If we can do this 100%, we can do a lot of other things, right? I know we want to predict like POI, we want to predict network, we want to predict radius. If you can predict this 100%, all those can be easily calculated, right? But of course, a lot of times it's not too easy, right? Due to data sparsity, due to the innate complex nature of human behavior. So the challenge are like this, right? One is mobility data is sparse and noisy. Anyone working in this space knows. And in fact, recent years, I think it's harder and harder to obtain high quality mobility data, right? So a lot of issues. Then also there's long-term dependency and spatial heterogeneity, right? Based on personal habits, based on weather anomalies, and then because of different urban events, it can be difficult to predict that. Our motivation, so the way we want to maybe tackle this or improve the precision or accuracy is try to capture this rhythm, right? For the first and second study, I keep saying about this rhythm, this periodicity, and can we use that to capture this, right? People's mobility are not random, and then they show strong daily and weekly rhythm, which we already know, right? So from that, and also a study from this institute actually shows 93% of daily trajectory are predictable, right? So we want to harness that, and then doing that for prediction. There are, of course, already many related works for mobility prediction. If you are ever interested in this idea, in this topic, there are a few directions, I think. Physically inspired models, right? The gravity model, radiation model, the classic, more physically inspired models. There's recurrent models, LSTM, graph flashback, transformer-based models, then GenNext, all this can possibly be used, have been used. There's time series foundation models. Recently there's a lot of talk about foundation models for human mobility, and I think there are a few different directions that has been explored, right? I think Aspen probably knows more than myself. But then I think one direction is the transformer-based models, right? Patch TST, iTransformers are some, pretty interesting ones. Then there's language-based models, right? The time LLM, auto times, those are, more leveraging the new LLM models. So going back to what I said before, right? We want to propose something that can capture this. So we propose this model called rhythm. This is we call it reasoning with a hierarchical temporal tokenization for human mobility, right? To predict the model. If you look closely, our name, we call it rhythm, but our name does not have Y. So I'm looking for suggestions how to get that Y into our. Okay, all right. Let's call that Plan B. All right. So, but the idea is really before we take this whole trajectory across different days and when we plug in, right? Use that as our embedding, but that's time consuming and also does not really incorporate the periodicity. So our idea is really to, let me see if I have a better one here. Yeah, maybe I'll just directly go to this slide and then come back. So our idea is basically we breaks the sequence into daily trajectories, right? As segments of lengths, right? Let's say each X now is for every 15 minutes or every half hour, right? And then from that we can embedding this. This basically make our reduce the sequence length from T, which can be random. Some days some individual will have 100 points, other days maybe 20 points, and another day 5 points, right? So in this way, actually, we can formalize it and also reduce the sequence from T to T divided by S, right? To mitigate the complexity. Then we basically using this hierarchical attention mechanism to incorporate this into the model. Right? The reason we want to use this attention here is mostly because I forgot what I was trying to say. Right. So the reason we want to do this is that we want to pass this from the let's say the individual level of the data points goes through a layer of the conversion and to one level of attention. Then we further group this into either 24 hours or 7 days to incorporate this periodicity, and then we continue group that into attention and then pass on to the model. Right. So step by step, reducing the complexity of this, and then the segment level, basically a segment level representation is formed by this pooling, and then that's denoted by PES. Right. And also the segment level attention. go to here. So then we also use a prompt to kind of capture what we are trying to. We use different tokens to provide a daily semantic trajectory information. So what we are trying to do is that we get the trajectory information and then go through language model and then try to extract the information from it, and then use that to help the model to predict what will happen next, right? To pass on to the next task description. So the idea here is basically this type of a semantic embedding help us to leverage the language model without the need to training too much of the layers, too much of the parameters, right? Eventually, I think we only need to train about 15% of the parameters instead of the whole parameter space. Of course, I know that for many of you probably also are already thinking about that. Usually, if we want to achieve some kind of an edge computing, we want to make sure that we reduce that percentage of a trained model to 10%, right, instead of 15%. We're still working on that. But at this point, our machine, which is not too gigantic, it's already able to handle it pretty efficiently, right? Then we also, so here we actually use the LLA MOS 3.2, the Llama 3.2 for our training. So I don't think I showed the whole architecture yet, but this is basically what we have. We have a hierarchical temporal tokenization to taking the trajectory to, so basically for the trajectory, we get the temporal embedding, but also the LLM embedding, right, to go through the next level. And then we also from the information, the times, basically the timestamp, we get the temporal embedding and also pass that into the next level. Then from there, all this information goes through a large language model. That's the body of it. So for this part, like I said, we basically freeze it and only need to train a small number of parameters. And once we have that information, we'll pass on to the next level and then eventually get our output prediction. Right? So I think I missed quite some details, but I hope the rough structure of this architecture is makes sense. And like I said, if you are interested in more of these details, I'm happy to put you in contact with my PhD students. And I think we are, he's continuing refining this model. Right? So we hope to be able to achieve a higher accuracy. So we have this model, then we of course need to do a few experiments. We use a data set actually from the two cities from the workshop, I think has been co-hosted. So we use the data from here in two cities, Sapporo and Kumamoto. We also used a little bit of the SPECTUS data. The accuracy for SPECTUS data, for human mobility data, is much higher than what we see here because this is more sparse. But the spatial resolution is 500 meter times 500 meter. And the temporal resolution is every 30 minutes. So we basically have 48 records a day. And then again, sparsity is a big issue, right? So we only have 31% of the completeness rates. From there, we split data into training, validation, test states, test sets as common procedure. And the metrics, the experiment running. So for each users, right, we use 1 week of mobility data to predict the following day, right? So 48 times 7, that's how many timestamps we use to train the model to predict. Then we predict the next 48 timestamps. The metrics, accuracy K, mean reciprocal ranks. I think these are more common for a general machine learning models. But then because this is mostly for human mobility, we also use blue and dynamic time wrapping. And the We also compared our model to a bunch of different models. The more common, I guess, already become relatively classical model is LSTM and DeepMove. Then we compared to the transformer-based model, including both PMT and STMO-BERT, that's model from my lab, and then also one LM-based model. So from here, these are the results. I think some of the numbers are actually not accurate. We are not, in some cases, we are not better than the PMT model, which good thing is also from our lab. But you can see that in most cases, we achieved top one or top two using our model. For these parameters, and then also for the other two parameters, the blue and the DTW, we were able to achieve relatively good result. We constantly, in some cases, but especially here, we're constantly lacking behind the COLA. I think the COLA is, the system is tuned for future prediction. So that's why we are actually learning from them and try to incorporate some of their mechanisms into our model. So hopefully, like I said, we are still working on this, and hopefully this can achieve better prediction. Of course, some other standard performance, we tested, our the training speed versus performance, and I think we are pretty on par with other models. We did the ablation study, and a key thing is that we realized this some of these information, especially, for example, the tokenization, the LLM layer is very helpful for us to improve our prediction. So getting the semantic meaning by embedding into it is important. We also did this scalability test with different size of large language models, right? There's many open models from Hugging Face, and we chosen a few and then test them. So you can see basically with size increase that our accuracy increase as well. Right? So nothing too surprised here. Generally speaking, so from here, we introduce this hierarchical temporal tokenization. I think that's really our key contribution here, right? We design a relatively efficient prompt-based approach. Room to improve, we're working on it. We leverage the pre-trained LLM model to reduce computing costs by about 25% and achieved 2.5 improvement in prediction accuracy with a 5% increase during weekends, right? So that's what we see. That's actually the last study I want to tell you. This, instead of, I guess, showing the a contributor picture, these are some people from my lab. We constantly have game nights, and you're welcome to join us. Believe it or not, our lab is actually just behind this building, so easy to join. Right? They are actually playing a kids game called Spaghetti Snow Yeti. Have anyone played that one? You have a ball, have all kinds of spaghettis on top, and put a Yeti on top of it. Then each one taking one noodle out of it, and then see who gets the Yeti drop into the ball. So kids game, a lot of fun. You can see that. That's all. That's all I want to share. Yeah. Let me know if I have any questions. Thank you.
Right, I'm gonna start with one. So, for the second and the first study, we should try to model, say, people's behavior by this kind of aggregate functions by design. I'm really interested about who doesn't actually behave like that. You identify, even though you don't do aggregates over large areas, you identify who doesn't actually fit those kind of daily patterns.
Right, that's a good question. We designed the model in that way, right? So we try to fit everyone into that being. I guess, maybe not directly answer that question, but maybe offer some insight. We do try to look into whose variation is larger, or which neighborhood offer the largest variation. I have a figure I didn't really put there. What we consistently see is also the neighborhoods, the CBGs with majority Black population have the largest variation. And then from there, you can probably already guess why that is, right? Most of them probably working on labor-intensive jobs, essential jobs, maybe in the even maybe multiple shifts from different job, right? So what we observe is that they have much higher variation, does not fit or have less fitness to the model we are proposing. We actually wrote as the chaotic of this behavior actually hinted deeper socioeconomic problem here, right? But I'm glad you asked that question. Yeah.
There's also this thing about we want to deploy interventions in areas in which the variability of behaviors is so large.
Right.
Something that we did, for example, for the food project,
absolutely,
you have to ask yourself, if the intervention is going to be successful because there's the people don't comply basically with I don't know, for example, regular shifts or regular times or regular
Right. Totally. Yeah.
More questions for Ryan?
You mentioned initially the shock distinction and then shock into the classic definition of the hair policy. Are there situations that you can put in data where there are consistent definitions that don't return like that? Some policies implemented or some allocating occurs and people actually don't return.
That's a really good question. We haven't for a long time because those kind of disasters rarely happen, right? So most of the time we observe something that just take much longer to return, like COVID, like I think also Hurricane Harvey, right? To take quite some time to recover. But when I was doing my PhD, we used Twitter data to analyzing disasters around the globe. And I distinctly remember this Typhoon Haiyan who attacked Indonesia. And we see that pattern never returned. So after 12 months at least. So that was a category 5 hurricane attacked this city in Indonesia. And then we saw the picture that basically the whole city has been eliminated. It took a long time to recover back to normal. I mean, there are individuals who will, but what I'm trying to say, there's a lot of variations, of course. Yeah, you see aggregatedly, this city has returned, but then there are small pocket of populations from certain areas, they take much longer. Their house has been washed away. They take much longer to return back to normal. That we definitely see. And I actually think that could be very interesting to examine, to understand what caused that, right? The extreme, we big data scientists, we tend to focus on big data and understand patterns, but I think small data, particular interesting case study could be very interesting as well. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Are you looking into that with specs data? I know. Yeah. I feel like someone should. Yeah. For sure.
So you said a couple times that one of the main differences might be what jobs in terms of the variation.
Right.
People's compliance.
Right.
Is there any way to tell, to show that? How good is the job data? Is it spatially random enough to subtract off?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we did a little bit. We made a little bit of effort to try to connect that with NTHS data, the travel survey, because the travel survey data, I think it's incorporates some of the survey data, but it incorporates some of their behavior. I don't think we see strong signals there yet. But also just because that data is also reported on the aggregated level. We haven't really been able to link to very detailed working there. I think that's actually a good question. Yeah. I feel like there need, like I said, the second study is ongoing. I think there's probably need to be more effort to link those two things together. Right. I know some survey data for each region. I think that's national workability data set, but it's survey each neighborhood or region. What are the percentage of low wage workers working there? That's probably something good to look at. Yeah, you remind me. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Did you look into work from home? Work from home, because you showed difference between COVID and after COVID.
Right.
It's not actual employment of individuals in the data.
Right.
Can you
working at home
and people go outside of home?
Right. So for the second study, I keep talking about the main result are just the percentage of people at home and the percentage of people going out. But we actually analyzed 3 parameters: home, not home, but also full-time working and part-time working. So they basically showed similar trends. We see similar differences here. Right. I mean, the data is aggregating that way. They report these as full-time worker and part-time worker, but I think there's a lot of assumptions baked into it. So it's still a little bit hard to dissect them. I think there's room to improve for sure. Yeah.
One more technical question was how do you infer each individual's prediction?
Oh, these are all based on census block group. So basically, if this individual's home, based on their nighttime location, is here and is located inside of this type of neighborhood, so that's so then we assume that the social, demographic, and economic characters of that neighborhood impact this person. So you maybe you are getting there. I'm not sure. But yes, it can possibly be that this individual is, maybe Hispanic individual, but living in a majority white neighborhood. That's totally possible. I think why presented, I'm a bit loose on this, but in fact, when we write it, we make sure to say this is this type of neighborhood, people from this type of neighborhood. But I mean, there's also, over 50 years of research on how neighborhood affect on individuals. So I think there's theoretical grounding for that. Right. Yeah. But I mean, for the first study, you see we have this 5 parameters, and one of them is, number of workers. So we actually do look into that as well. Yeah. This is, by the way, SafeGraph data set. So not sure if you ever use it, but I think it's, a lot of people study mobility use this data set. Yeah.
Here's a less serious question. At the beginning of your sentence, you showed the restoration functions for Boston, New York, and LA.
Right.
Why was Boston so much lower?
That's a good question. I think it's also relevant to the urban boundary we used. I think for some reason seems like the MSA area of Boston captured more rural areas or suburban areas around it compared to the others. So for some reason, this looks like that. I do need to double check on that. But we also, this looks like a big gap, but this does not start at, did not start at 0. So that's also contributed to that. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
The hierarchical temporal tokenization.
Right.
Is the aim there to reduce the amount of data, somehow compress information in sequences, and then get a more efficient prediction, next prediction?
Yeah, that's part of it for sure. That's part of it. But I also think I don't think a lot of machine learning model has intentionally baked this periodicity of people's mobility into it. Right. Every 24 hours, we basically reset our mobility pattern, and then every week we probably reset it again. So we will try to bake that in there, right? But granted, I mean, we only use 1 week to predict the next day. There are seasonal things we haven't captured there if we want to predict long term. But that's definitely open and a good question to to address, to solve as well. Yeah. Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Prediction there is next paid location, but not the POI.
Not the POI. We used lat long. No, we actually it's great. So 500 meter by 500 meter, right? But also, it's really difficult to say, next lat and long is here, right? So usually it's on aggregate level, and then if you see, I went kind of fast on this, but usually we report, is based on your ranking, based on your next location, right? And then the probability of all the other locations. Does your prediction match with the top predicted location? Does it match with the top inside of the top 3 predicted location or top 5? So I think that's pretty standard way, I guess, in human belief prediction to report that, right? Yeah.
Is there a way to augment the information with some POI data?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. I definitely think there is. We didn't go that route. The data also does not provide that. But I think with Spectus, I don't know if you guys are subscribed to their service, their platform. I think it's possible to do it. I was going to say, yeah, there's another thing. So for now, we are basically, this is also open question, right? For now, we take the spatial and temporal information, pass to the LLM, and take whatever out as a face value, right? But I think there can be matching between those two, right? Basically, meaning the reasoning does the LLM some function or some agent from the LLM matching with this information you are trying to capture, and can you have another instance or agent to capture another information? I think seems like some direction you are going to as well. I think that kind of matching and making that efficient, that's going to improve the accuracy a lot. We just haven't got there yet. Yeah.